Welcome to the Big Tech Gut Check here on Scrolling to Death. This is a weekly update for parents on all things social media and big tech. Today's episode is sponsored by Bark Technologies. I am truly grateful that these days we parents have safer device options for our kids. The Bark phone was built for families who are looking to protect their children online, to ramp up their online safety. It has parental controls built in and allows us to manage their entire digital experience super easily. More on Bark in the episode notes, but let's get into the updates for the week of August 12th, 2024. First up, the Center for Countering Digital Hate issued an insane new report about the amount of content on Instagram that is abusive toward women. And when that content is reported, nothing happens. So CCDH selected 5 Republican and 5 Democratic political candidates, females, and analyzed over 500,000 comments on their recent Instagram posts. 1 in 25 comments were identified as highly toxic, including sexist and racist abuse and death and rape threats. CCDH went further and reported 1,000 of these comments using Instagram's reporting tools, and a week later, Instagram had taken no action against 926 of them, leaving posts up like, quote, "Make rape legal," and, quote, "Death to her and her supporters." Instagram stated that these posts did not breach their community guidelines. Guess what, guys? Social media platforms like Instagram write these strict community guidelines, but then they have no incentive to enforce them. No one to force them to enforce them. No liability. And if they were truly to remove all of the content that does not meet guidelines, they would see a decrease in revenue, and they won't do that. Social media platforms actually prefer violent and offensive conversations because they bring in a ton of money. And more often than not, if a conversation increases engagement, no matter how harmful, it stays, even when what is being said is a threat to women or minority groups or children. Thank you to CCDH for this study, and I've included a link in the episode notes. Something else that came out this week was a pretty cool piece in the Sunday Times. The interviewer for this publication put together a phone detox for her 2 sons and 8 of their friends. So basically, for 4 weeks, they could only use their smartphones for 1 hour per day, and during the other 23 hours, they were able to use a light phone. Light phone is a Wi-Fi enabled device that only calls or texts and has basic apps like an alarm, calculator, map, and calendar, but no social media and no internet browser. Prior to this detox, the boys liked social media, they used it, but they weren't really addicted to it. The 2 girls, on the other hand, they told interviewers things like, quote, "Social media is a trap. You're stuck because if you do escape, you're classified as a weirdo and fall behind on trends. You won't understand what people are talking about." The girls shared, quote, "You know it's all fake, but you still feel like it's real. You still can't help comparing yourself with everyone who looks pretty and feeling bad about yourself. And you're going to get addicted. It's literally like a drug." These girls even went as far as to criticize social media apps themselves, saying, quote, "Apps are targeting girls younger and younger. It's sickening. The people who own them are ruining children's lives just to get money. Truth." And before the detox even started, these kids admitted that they know kids their age have mental health problems because they're on their phones a lot, but they feel they have no choice. So fast forward to 4 weeks, sans smartphones, and the teens were so grateful. They noticed things they had never noticed before, like how pointless Snapchat is, like how kids at school don't know how to have meaningful conversations, like how short everyone's attention spans are, like how everyone is always looking at their phones and not at each other. The kids spent more time with their family and neighbors, and they read books. They felt less tired. They felt like kids again. And the habits are sticking. One of the boys' screen time went down to 1 hour per day after the experiment. One big takeaway that I think parents should think about is that every single one of these teens would have hated to do the experiment alone. It would have felt like a punishment and weird and isolating. If we're going to see positive changes on a larger scale related to kids and phones, we need collective action. And this experiment is proof that time away from smartphones is what our kids need. But they can't do it on their own. We have to make this decision for them and with them, to delay and to bring other families in on it. Let's let kids be kids. Moving on to a couple research updates for this week. First, a new study by JAMA Pediatrics found that children logging 75 minutes or more of daily screen time at 3.5 years old were found to be more likely to have outbursts of anger and frustration a year later, and the same for the following year. So basically, tablet use in early childhood leads to anger outbursts and the inability for children to regulate their emotions. They are not able to develop strong internal emotional regulation skills that can follow them through teen years and adulthood. Another reminder that tablets and screens are not good for young children. One more research update for this week, and this one is super interesting. So, research has exposed that children who spend excessive time on screens are first being left behind developmentally, but also not learning how to properly use their facial expressions. This is being called still face syndrome. And guess where they're learning this? From us, their parents. A study published last year at UC Santa Barbara found that parents who use their phones often in front of their kids experience still face, an expressionless appearance that's often interpreted by our children as depression. This can impact your child's developmental and emotional skills. A child develops their emotional intelligence by watching us, looking at our faces, our eyes, and copying us. If you do need to use your phone in front of your child, do it briefly and tell them what you are using it for. When we're with our kids, we have to think about using our phone as a tool, not a toy. And if what we're doing on our phone is not necessary, put it away when we're in front of our kids. Give them our attention at all possible moments. This will benefit not only them, but you. So to close out this week, we're going to talk about one of the biggest and most important things to happen this year, and that is the Kids Online Safety Act, or KOSA. All of the social media harms that I talk about, all the kids who have died, it doesn't have to be this way. There is a bill that will protect children from death, from harm, from becoming addicted to the platforms, all the things I talk about. So about 3 years ago, KOSA was developed. And for the past 3 years, KOSA has bounced around in the Senate and the House, going through reviews and markups to satisfy all the parties involved. And for the past 3 years, big tech companies have spent millions of dollars trying to convince our legislators that KOSA will censor free speech, will be bad for minority communities. So I'm going to tell you briefly what KOSA is and why big tech is straight up lying. If KOSA is enacted, social media spaces will be safer for children and teens. There's a section in KOSA called duty of care. This requires large social media companies to exercise reasonable care in how they implement dangerous design features that are created to addict our children, like infinite scroll, public like counts, and harmful filters like the plastic surgery filter. Those will go away. There's a section in KOSA about safeguards and tools that will provide families with functions to keep kids safe, like the ability to opt them out of algorithms, to limit strangers from contacting our kids, and limit other addictive features like autoplay and push notifications. In KOSA's Notice and Transparency section, platforms will be required to disclose whether they use any harmful design features and notify families on how to use the safeguards and tools. And the largest social media companies will need to file annual reports on the risks their products pose to children and teens. KOSA would require that all the data collected by social media algorithms be available for review by academic organizations and researchers, so parents have the real data on what's happening on the platforms. KOSA will require kids to be placed under the strongest safety settings by default. KOSA would create a channel of reporting for users to report harassment or threats, systems which are now confusing and most often ignored. KOSA would disable the geotagging feature for kids, which is currently being used by drug dealers and predators to target minors. To overview, KOSA changes the focus of these social media platforms from a duty of profit, exploiting children for money, to a duty of care, protecting children. It's about the harmful design of the platforms, not about censoring or limiting any type of content. There are millions of children who have been harmed and so many children who have died because of social media's dangerous functionality. These kids would be alive today if KOSA had passed. So now on to the pushback. Social media companies don't want KOSA because they'll make less money. Oh, by the way, Meta made $134 billion last year, so I think they can afford to take a little hit. But I digress. So big tech is telling legislators and the public through tons of press articles that your free speech will be limited if KOSA were to pass. This is untrue, and we're going to talk about why. KOSA is strictly content neutral and has explicit provisions that have been written to prevent censorship. Sections 102A and B of KOSA talks about how KOSA cannot prevent a minor from being able to find the content that he or she is searching for, and states that the duty of care is specifically limited to harms against children, like physical violence, cyberbullying, sexual exploitation, and illegal substances. KOSA cannot be used as a means to limit access to content or prevent kids and teens from seeking out important online resources. So can a child seek out content about self-harm if they are looking for it? Yes, that is their right. But can TikTok continue to recommend live murder videos to children in the For You feed? No, not under KOSA. Big tech also wants you to believe that KOSA will harm LGBTQ plus youth through limiting access to support that they will find on social media, and that KOSA could be weaponized by bad actors to suppress affirming content for LGBTQ plus young people. This is untrue. KOSA was crafted through years of negotiations with major advocates in the LGBTQ plus community and groups to create meaningful protections for these communities. Earlier this year, there were a number of specific changes made to KOSA which addressed concerns fully. And after that, KOSA garnered full support from major organizations like GLAAD, the Human Rights Campaign, the National Center for Lesbian Rights, the Trevor Project, and so many more. This narrative they're pushing is an example of big tech literally hiding behind one of the vulnerable communities that it exploits. The fact is that without KOSA, LGBTQ plus youth are harmed and exploited at much higher rates than others online. KOSA would give this community protections they are currently lacking. Okay, so a couple weeks ago, KOSA passed the Senate, 91-3. That is unprecedented. It would have been unanimous if 3 senators who voted no weren't funded and influenced by big tech. What happens now is that KOSA moves to the House of Representatives. If it passes there, KOSA lands on President Biden's desk for signature, and he has expressed that he would enact KOSA into law. We are getting really close to getting our kids protected on the social media platforms that are currently harming them. We need your representative in the House to co-sponsor KOSA. There are currently about 45 representatives that co-sponsor KOSA, and we need more. So please go to house.gov, enter your zip code, find your local rep, and send them a message or call them. Ask them to protect your children by co-sponsoring KOSA. I'm even scheduling a meeting with my local rep in person to talk to her about KOSA. There is nothing more important than the safety of our children on platforms that they feel forced to use to socialize with their friends. The status quo is harmful and it's not fair, and we all deserve better. That's it for this week on the Big Tech Gut Check here on Scrolling to Death. Thank you so much for being a part of this important conversation, and I will be in touch next week.